Inshallah, we start with the right side, then inshallah we come to Rasul.
My question is that if you have a young boy, is it proper that you take him or her to the Quran, then the master will be, then you take up to the which is the right way?
Do you mean that?
I'm saying that if you have a young boy, the first step is to take him or her to the Quran, then the master will be, then you take up to secular education, which is the right way.
Okay, brother's question concerning the steps for education of the child. Do we begin with the Quran, then we can take the child to the various elements of the religion, and then we put them into the secular education system? Is this the steps that we should follow?
Let's say that education begins at home. This is where the educational process should begin, in the home. And primarily that educational process is the responsibility of the home. It is only in modern times that, we are now taking children out of the home and putting them in schools at such young ages. Yes, earlier generations, people did come out, listen to the first to set up universities, etc. But this was later on in life, not the early years. Not the early years. The early years, it was the home in which they learned. From the mother, from the father, from the uncle, from the family members, they taught those young children. The famous scholar Sufyan al-Thawri, he had narrated that when he went out at the age of 13, he went out to seek knowledge. Left the home. Up until the age of 13, he studied in his home. His mother was teaching him. And she told him, mother and father, but she told him when he was setting out, son, if you write 10 sentences, you're recording knowledge, you've gone into classes and you're learning. If you're recording knowledge, you've recorded 10 words or 10 sentences, and your faith has not increased, then you must check yourself. You must check yourself about your intentions. She gave that wisdom to her son. Education begins in the home. It should be with the Quran. It should be knowledge of Allah, because of course, first of all, it's knowledge of Allah. The first words that the child should be able to say should be Allah. We should encourage them to make this among their first words. So, initially in the home, we should give them as much Islamic knowledge as we can. Oftentimes, their level of knowledge will be limited by us. We are the ones who will limit their education. We feel they're too young, they can't understand this, and so on, but you'll be surprised at what children are able to understand. So, as parents, if we want to do it effectively, then we should take advice, because most of us are not coming from traditions of learning, etc. So parenthood is an experiment. We have children and we experiment with them. We don't really have clear knowledge and guidance as to what we should do, what we shouldn't do. This we can take from those who have studied early childhood education, developing a system how to educate our children in the home properly. So we educate them on one hand to the deen, to know Allah, to be able to relate everything back to Allah. They grew up with that consciousness of Allah. This is most important. At the same time, these children can also be taught reading, writing, arithmetic in the home on a simple scale. We don't necessarily need to make it in a classroom format, but we can teach them these things too. We don't have to say it's either this or that. We only teach them the diniyat, the religious things, then later on, after they learn all of it, then we'll start. No. These things can be done together. So we take advice, we take guidance. What many of us need are parenting classes. We need to have parenting classes to help us to be good parents. So if we are able to introduce such programs in our masjids, in our Islamic centers, etc., to help parents gain the necessary skills to effectively raise Muslim children, then, alhamdulillah, we can begin to make a real difference.
As you know, the Islamic state of Abbasid is when the science and the Islamic knowledge has flourished. Do we have a clear view of how was the system of education at that time?
Okay, brother's question, knowing that the flourishing of Islamic and what we may call secular academic knowledge took place, reached its peak during the early Abbasid era. Do we have any clear knowledge as to the educational systems that existed at that time? Yes, we do. It's been recorded. Research works have been done on educational systems during the time of the Abbasids, during the time of the Umayyads, the time of the Ottomans, etc. Research, etc. has been done. So that information is available. But of course, to some degree, we have technological developments which weren't around at that time, which facilitate a lot of things which they couldn't do then. So it doesn't mean we have to go back and do things exactly the same way they did it. They evolved and developed their system based on the technology which was available to them at that time. Some of the principles of education we can take from them, benefit from their efforts, but at the same time we have things in our hands which were not available then, computers, computer programs which can enhance the learning experience, etc., which they didn't have. We can utilize these things. So when we're going to tackle it, we benefit from what happened in the past, but we also benefit from the knowledge which has been gathered in the present, which can enable us to effectively educate our children. Okay.
I would like you to give an answer. It's not a question. Most of us as parents, most of the youth believe that by taking Islamic education, we have no careers. So if we are going to give priority to Islamic education, the concept that there is no career is a misconception.
My brother's suggestion to me to clarify and give some advice with regards to seeking Islamic knowledge for our youth to be engaged in this particular line, that the general impression is that one who decides to become a scholar, a Muslim scholar, he has no future. So if our child suggests this, we would discourage them. And only those who have been failures academically will say, okay, nothing else to do, you may as well go. Right? But of course, this is the mistake of the parents, that this is their approach. On one hand. On the other hand, if our children are raised properly, respecting Islamic knowledge, knowing who were the heroes of Islam. If you ask most kids who is Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, they can give you all about these people. But if you ask them who is Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, they say what? They have no idea who is Al-Layth ibn Sa'd. So this is our fault. We have allowed them to grow up mastering knowledge of confusion. You know, they are well versed in confusion. We have not raised them with proper knowledge of the true lights of Islam. Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Shafi'i, their contemporaries, they should know who these people are. These names should ring a bell in their ears. They respect these people for the efforts that they made for the Ummah. And if they grew up with that respect, then you won't have to convince them there is a future in studying the deen. But because they didn't grow up with that, then it becomes a problem. And parents don't see any future in religious education.
Now, there's a question here. He's asking, Sheikh, can you please assist the Islamic teachers with an Islamic syllabus for primary, secondary, and college? Shukran.
This, of course, is entering into specifics. Islamic studies syllabi have been worked on by a number of educational groups. There is a set of syllabi which is already prepared. Dar es Salaam has produced a series of books from first standard up to 8th, 9th standard. Personally myself, I wrote 4 books for high school, because I taught Islamic studies in high school for 10 years in Riyadh. So I wrote 4 books. They're called Islamic Studies Series. They're being used in many schools around the world. Recently, an institute has been set up in Riyadh, and they are in the process of producing Islamic texts. They've done the first 3 grades have been published. They've worked out the details for the rest, and theirs is perhaps the most detailed syllabi. But this information is available. The problem is not so much with the syllabi. Syllabi is an element of the problem, but the other subjects that are being taught in the school, this is where the biggest problem lies. If we are to think that an Islamic school is one which has Islamic studies on the curriculum, Arabic and Quran, and 3/4 of the curriculum or 7/8 of the curriculum are the secular academic subjects, then actually we have not achieved Islamic education. That is really not an Islamic educational institution. That is an institution which is perpetuating the Christian view of education, which is based on the well-known statement Leave unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. You separate religious education from secular education and secular life. And that is a perpetuation of this schizophrenic view of education. The Islamic view is that every subject which is taught in the Islamic institution should be taught from an Islamic perspective. Mathematics, history, science, geography, every subject should be taught from an Islamic perspective. Now some teachers, math teachers, will be the first to jump up and say, but how do you Islamize mathematics? How do you Islamize 2 plus 2 equals 4? Where does religion come in there? We say, okay, you have to teach 2 plus 2 equals 4. So we say to the students, in the morning for Salatul Fajr, you have to pray 2 rak'at of Sunnah. And then 2 rak'at of Fard. So what is the total number of rak'at that you have to pray? 4 rak'at. It's possible. It's possible. There's a lot that we can do. It doesn't change the essential elements of the academics. We still teach it, but we keep the child's mind connected with Islam. They don't come through the system thinking that Islam is one thing and then academic secular knowledge is something else. No. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. It was all taught to Adam. Everything. All knowledge which is true and real knowledge is from Allah. There is knowledge which we call revealed knowledge, revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah, and there other knowledge we can call it acquired knowledge. We have acquired it through experimentation, through research, through study, etc. It's acquired. But where did it come from? We didn't create it. It still came from Allah. And when you look at the greatest developments, inventions in the history of human technology, for example, the X-ray, which is essential in modern medicine now, you X-ray. How was that discovered? Did Madame Curie begin, she's Madame Curie, the one who discovered it. Did she begin looking for X-rays? No. She had some radium in the corner of her lab. She had some photographic paper hanging, and her hand happened to pass between the radium and the photographic film, and she saw the bones of her hand in the film. So, she was researching something else altogether, and she found that. And when you go to look at the great inventions, most of it is that way. All the way back to the classical story that's not really actually factually established of Newton, the apple falling and bonking him on the head, and he started to think about gravity. You know all the stories, right? Some of them are just stories, but some of them, many of them are very real. The majority of the great inventions happened by accident. That's what they call it. We say, Allah revealed it to them to benefit humankind at the time when he saw suitable. So, that is how our children should grow up understanding knowledge. That it is all from Allah. What is true, real knowledge, it is from Allah.
There is an interesting question here. He's asking, if you have a private school, which teach ayah, is this allowed? I think the question of this is that he's asking, you're a Muslim and you have a private school and the Christians are coming. So should you teach the Christians CRE? Should you employ a Christian teacher to teach CRE?
To teach what?
To teach Christian religion education. In Kenya we have Islamic religious education in government schools, and we also have CRE, Christian religious education.
CRE, yeah?
Yeah.
For a Muslim to subsidize, to pay for, to set up an institution in which Christian religious education is being taught is haram. Not permissible. If you have a faith-based school, this is what our schools are. They're faith-based. They're based on faith. We believe that the Islamic faith is the true faith. For us to employ somebody to teach something else is falsehood. We are promoting falsehood. We don't deny the right of Christians to teach their religion. They have a right. It's a multicultural society. You can teach whatever you want to teach. But in our institution should teach Islam. If non-Muslims are studying in that institution, they're required to take the same subjects that Muslims are taking. We don't make exceptions. We're not saying you have to become Muslim, but you are in our institution, just like when we went into their institutions, they gave us a full dose, right? Those of us who went there, we know, they gave us a full dose, right? So, why should we compromise and say, well, why? We teach what we believe. And if they want to accept it, that's their choice, but we're not forcing anybody. There's no compulsion in religion.
Excuse me. The question wasn't that.
Okay.
The question is, we have private schools who are mostly owned by Christians. We have Muslim students going to the same schools. Are Muslim students allowed to study those Christian lessons?
Okay, brother's question, for those of us who have mistakenly put our children in Christian schools, is it permissible for us to allow our children to study Christian religious education? No, it is not permissible. This is again what we call spiritual suicide. That's what we're doing. We are putting our child's faith at risk. They're young, they're impressionable. We all know how children treat their teachers. The teacher will favor the opinion of the teacher over ours. We tell them sometimes what the teacher said, but the teacher said. That is what the teacher becomes in the eyes of the child, and that's why I say it is haram for us to put our children in the hands of non-Muslims to teach them. It is not permissible Islamically, unless there are mitigating circumstances. For example, this subject which is being taught can only be gained from this non-Muslim. So we go there to get that knowledge, that much, to the degree necessary. But just to say, throw the kids in the school, sink or swim, no. No, this is wrong.
Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, we welcome you, brother. We're very happy to get you here. We welcome Kenya. MashaAllah, hope you enjoy. I have a little comments and then question. I contradict your theory. I believe a Muslim children or student go where, in which school or what he learned doesn't matter. That students, after getting the education, how he practiced in his own life, that is important. I believe I have referenced a lot of Muslim doctors are doing a lot of inhuman work than a Christian doctor who is doing fantastic job for the society, for the people. So my question, if the parents is very important, how the parents and the children are practicing Islam in their own life after learning education. For you, sir, I have a different question in terms of your reference where you started the lectures with the morality. You compare the Western society and the Muslim society and so say that morality is important. My questions are to you. Why in Saudi Arabia human rights and justice doesn't work? And what is the important role and playing of the ulamas about these matters? Thank you.
Our brother's first comment, which I will have to comment on, that in his opinion, we put our children in any school, it doesn't matter what school we put them in, they will get education, and if the education is good, they will be able to make the right decisions for themselves. Depending, of course, on home support, etc., Islamically. My opinion, as I expressed before, when you're dealing with children, it's one thing when you're talking about adults. You've got an adult, somebody has gone through a process, educated, they've understood who they are as a Muslim, what their mission in life is, they've understood Islam, they know. And you put them in a non-Muslim environment of education, higher education, they can sit in that class with that professor and he is firing his ideas and they can resist it because they have been raised and trained and they understand. These are adults. Their minds are developed. Inshallah, they're capable of dealing with that. But when you're dealing with children, you've got another situation altogether. To compare them with adults, I would say, sir, that no serious educationalist would agree with you. Because education is defined in the general sense as the transmission of culture. It is the transmission primarily of culture from one generation to the next. So if you put your children in the hands of educationalists who have another culture, a culture based on many principles which are against our principles of Islam, then what can you expect for these children? What can you expect for these children? So I disagree, I beg to disagree, and I would argue, and I would even get the support of non-Muslim educationalists to support what I'm saying. In fact, in the West now, the rise in homeschooling is phenomenal. So many students, non-Muslims, are pulling their children out of the school system, the Western education system, because of what is happening to them there. This is non-Muslims trying to save their children. And they've developed a huge network of homeschooling with, accreditation of their studies. And this, if you want to teach your child at home now, they have complete syllabi, worked out details, everything for you. Why? Because that system has failed. It has failed from one perspective or another perspective. As to the question which our brother raised about Saudi Arabia, and you know what? The issues of Saudi Arabia in the end, we can do nothing about. If Saudi Arabia failed, that is Saudi Arabia and their responsibilities. Allah will not ask us about why Saudi Arabia failed in the issues that you raise. He will ask us about why Kenya Kenyan Muslims, Nairobi Muslims failed? This is the question, and this is where we should keep the focus. Don't get distracted. The educational system, we don't judge Islam by what happens in Saudi Arabia. You know, people say to me, I take the position that smoking is haram. But no, we can buy cigarettes at the Kaaba. The fact that cigarettes may be sold in Saudi Arabia around the Kaaba, this is not telling us halal and haram. We don't judge halal and haram by what goes on in Saudi Arabia. This is not our criterion. Our criterion is Quran and Sunnah. As understood by the early generation, the great scholars of Islam, this is our criterion. So if there is a failure in the educational system of Saudi Arabia, they have to address those issues. There are problems. As I said, the problems that I spoke about here are not problems limited to Kenya, to Nairobi. They are globalized problems that have to be tackled in each and every part of the Muslim world. So, as I said, my comment in terms of Saudi Arabia is that where they have failed, they need to correct it, they need to address it. Their systems are not perfect, they've tried, and as human beings, human efforts succeed and they fail. They make mistakes and they make correct decisions. And they're not immune from error, just as the rest of us are.